Welcome to CivilNet. My guest today from Los Angeles is Oshagan, who is a geophysicist turned photographer, actually simultaneously geophysicist and photographer. Ara, thank you for joining us on CivilNet.
Good morning.
This is Oshagan week at CivilNet. We were just talking a couple of days ago about your grandfather, Hagop Oshagan's Menatsortats translation into English. And today we're talking to you about a project that you began years ago that you called Eyewitness, that involved documenting the stories of genocide survivors through photography. Is that fair?
Yeah, well, photography and oral history, you know, it was very interesting. But I started, that was the very first project that I did as a photographer, and I really didn't know what I was doing as a photographer. But I started doing portraits of survivors because I thought it was something that had to be done at that point at a very, very critical time before they had all passed away. And so, but then later on, we realized that we needed to have oral history also to make the project more complete and to tell the story in a more complete way.
You know, what is amazing is that in this whole business of genocide documentation, there are two extremes, right? There's the archives of the governments that are slowly being made public, made accessible to the public. And then there are these almost too late oral history efforts by various organizations, individuals, and photographers as a form of oral history. Did you feel that they knew that they were becoming a part of history by participating in this, or were you pulling teeth to get them to participate?
No, they participated very eagerly. I think my experience has been, I think people have had different experiences. My experience has been that whoever I asked to speak to or to photograph, they've been very willing to tell their story. Because we realize, as we know as a nation, our story has not been told. We have heard of many other, especially the Holocaust has been told over and over and over and again. So the getting of the archive, the collection of the archive of not only the images and the stories was critical, and people realized that it was coming to the end of the line here, and they were very eager to tell their story.
Your stories, your sort of oral history documentation, the photography project, is not just oral history. I mean, your photos don't look anything like my photos. Your photos stand on their own, and they're a work of art in and of themselves, regardless of the subject. Do you see them that way?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, there's a very specific sort of conceptual background to that, the way we do our portraits, and so we always are very much focused on the eyes of the survivors, because the whole idea is about witnessing and eyewitnessing. And so when you look into somebody's eyes, you are sort of seeing what they saw. So you sort of recreate in that moment of looking at the image, you try to recreate that, the witnessing of the witnessing, really. So like the viewer becomes twice removed from the witnessing process. And we always put my friend and I, Levon Parian is my sort of partner photographer on this project. We always put them with a black background. The black background, of course, signifying the genocide itself, sort of the black hole in which these people lived for many years, and the light that's on their faces, lifting them up out of that darkness. So there are these things that are sort of the conceptual frameworks of how we decided to make these images to connect to the genocide, to the event. And the black background, sort of what it does, it sort of wipes out the current context in which they're in, it wipes out the today, and it makes it possible for you to sort of connect to where they were at the time. It recontextualizes in sort of the symbolic black of the genocide.
What was the reaction of the subjects themselves? You showed them their pictures?
Yeah, not all the time, but several times. We not only did photos, but we also did oral history interviews. And so we kept returning to a lot of the survivors, and we gave them photos. As a, you know, we all, I think, as a nation, realize it's like it's very critical to have this kind of documents, these kinds of visual and oral documents to tell our story. And so they also realized that, and it was very important for them, and that connection was very strong between us and all the survivors.
What about resistance? Resistance from them, resistance from family members that, you know, you're evoking old pains, leave them alone, any of that?
Very little. I mean, the one incident that I can recall or retell is that we were interviewing somebody, and he became sick during an interview, because even though he had talked about it in the past, he hadn't talked about it very recent in the past, and then he became very sick after that. And after that, after a while, we heard that he had actually passed away. I mean, so it is a very difficult thing for them to do. But as I said, very, very few survivors actually refused to speak.
When you exhibit these photos, what is the reaction? Is it, when I look at your photos, it makes me so much more aware of the fact that it's over, 100 years are over. Time has done its thing. What other kinds of reactions do you get?
Well, the typical reaction is very emotional. People will walk through an exhibit. We've had a number of people actually cry as they went through the exhibit, and people, especially people who know very little about it, and even Armenians who know something about it. You know, we all know, I think, something about it in general. We know that this happened, that we walked from here or from this to that. But I think we haven't told our story to ourselves, really, I think, perhaps enough detail. And so when these stories on the wall are in excruciating detail of somebody actually witnessing that and that happening to them and the things that they went through, people are moved significantly.
It's very interesting that as the years go by, we're going to show several interviews today with individuals who have different kinds of projects. As the years go by, the effort more and more is to focus on the individual human stories rather than the general numbers, maps, and journeys, as you said.
Yeah, I think that's been done. I feel that our historians, even though, as you know, it's still there is a political effort to deny that what happened, but the mapping of it in terms of what happened historically, I think, has been done pretty thoroughly. I mean, there's still huge gaps in different places where there's always need to be first, but what really needs to happen now, these things that have been collected in every which way, be it images or a videography or oral history, they need to come out into the world. These archives that we've generated, and which we have actually quite a bit, we think we don't have any, but we have quite a bit, need to come out in the world, need to be out in exhibits, in performance art, in installations, and things like this where people can interact with them. I mean, I think that's really, really critical now. Not just put them away in our little closet, which is very important to have that in our closet, but to bring it out in the world and really show people what the stories are and what happened and have people connect with it. I think that's the critical step that we need to get to. I mean, I think 100 years anniversary is going to be sort of our opportunity to make that statement in multiple ways if we can.
That's a great way to end the conversation and to think about how we use everything we have really in the next 100 years. Thank you, Ara Oshagan. Yes. Thank you for your time and sharing your photography with us and for participating in this day of remembering and planning. Thank you for following us on CivilNet.